Okay, we're going to look at determining the closing balance for a credit card. Now, the closing balance for a credit card is the amount owing on the credit card at the end of the month or the end of the statement period. Now, below as part of a credit card statement, it's the account summary. Now, clearly, underlined in red, you can see the closing balance. But how do they calculate that? Well, they use the following formula. It's the previous balance. The previous balance is how much you owe on the credit card from the previous month or previous statement period. That's the amount that you haven't paid off. So previous balance plus any purchases you've made, plus any cash advances. That means any cash you've taken out of the ATM or from a shop. And then they add any fees or charges on the statement, then add interest as well, and any repayments that you've made. So if you put any cash onto the card to pay off your credit card, that's counted as a subtraction. So let's have a look at how this works from the account summary. So the previous balance here is $816.97, and you can see that right there. That's the balance from the previous statement. Now, purchases and cash advances, they're actually included together here. You can see that there, purchases and cash advances, they're included together. That's $791. So purchases plus cash advances together is the $791. Fees and charges, you can see has been included with the interest. So here's the interest and other charges. So fees and charges plus interest, that's been included together as $67.65, as you can see here, and then subtract the repayment. Now the repayment is $500, and you can tell that by the two letters CR, credit. Credit means you've put money onto the card to pay some of the debt off, but also you can see from the title payment, that's something you've repaid. So you subtract that 500. So let's do the calculation. So $816.97 plus $791 plus $67.65 minus 500 gives you the closing balance, which is $1175.62. Okay. Now, we can also calculate the closing balance by looking at the list of transactions on the credit card statement. So this list of transactions actually comes from the same statement as this image does up here. And we're going to use the same formula to calculate the amount owing. So let's have a look at purchases first. So purchases will be $85.60 here. Yep, so that's just the $85.60. That's Fresh at the Bay restaurant. Then $265.50, which is this amount here. And then $256.50, which is the amount we spent at Fabulous Fashions. Okay, and then we've got Sam's Hair and Beauty, that's $83.40. That's also a purchase. So it gives us a total of $691 in purchases. Next, we're going to look at cash advances or ATM withdrawals. So you can have a look up here, that's $100 there. So we took out $100 there. So cash advances, $100. Then any fees and charges. Now fees and charges, let's have a look at those. There's an ATM fee, as you can see, $4. And then we have an annual fee here, that's $55. And that's a total of $59 of fees there, as you can see. Okay, and last of all, we're going to look at the interest. Now the interest is here, and that's a total of $8.65. All right, so we're going to use the same formula now to calculate the closing balance. Rightio. So it's so closing balance is previous balance. All right, so we already know that's $816.97 because if you go up here, you can see it. There it is, $816.97. Then we're going to add our purchases. Okay, purchases. Purchases is $691, as you can tell there. There's $691. That's our purchases. Then we add any cash advances that we've taken out of the ATM. So that's $100. Okay, so you can see that here. There's $100 just there from the cash advances. Then we're going to add any fees and charges. Okay, so fees and charges you can see is $59. It's $59 there. Interest, okay, we're going to add the interest. Interest is $865, which is there. Then minus any repayments. Okay, here's the repayments, minus repayments. You made $500 of repayments. So we've got the same answer there. So on a credit card statement, you can calculate the amount owing from the account summary, or you could calculate it from the list of transactions. It's easier to do it from the account summary, right? But either method is correct. Now, just a little bit of advice on the credits on your account, any payments you make, any repayments or refunds, that can be shown on your account with a minus sign instead of the CR. So here, you made a payment of $250, and that's got a minus there saying that came off the amount that you owe, right? That means you've put $250 of credit onto your account. Here, $77.35 from the shop called Sports Plus Apparel, that there is a refund. So that also gets taken off your debt, hence the subtraction. Okay, let's have a look at an example from the HSC 2010. So in July, Ms. Allott received a statement for her credit card account. The account has no interest-free period. Compound interest is calculated daily and charged to her account on the statement date. What is the minimum payment due on this account? Okay, so if you look at her statement and go down to where it says minimum payment. So minimum payment due is either $25 or 5% of the closing balance, whichever is larger. Okay, so we need to calculate the closing balance here. You can see here there's a blank spot for the closing balance. Rightio. Now we need to calculate how many days is involved in this calculation. Okay, a couple of important things here. Firstly, interest is charged on the amounts from and including the date of purchase, yes, but also up to and including the statement date. Okay, now that means we're going to put a little +1 in our calculation for the number of days. So let's have a look. It's 29th of June and the statement date is 23rd of July. So we've got to calculate how many days from the 29th of June to July 23, including the statement date. Okay, now 30 days are in June. Okay, so if we're going to go from June 29 to July 23, let's calculate how many days it is. Okay, now there's 30 days in June, so I'm going to go 30 minus 29, right? Then we got the 23 days for July 23, but then because it says including the statement date, so that means you're going to put a little +1 on the end there. Okay, so that is going to give you a total of 25 days. Good. So that's how many days are involved in the interest calculation. Now, let's have a look at the formula we're going to use to work this out. So this is the compound interest formula that says compounding daily. Now, what do we put here for the principal? That's the question. Now, if you look at the statement, the previous balance was $529.46, and then we made payments of $529.46. So that means we paid off the previous balance. But then we made purchases of $1721.50. So at the moment, the amount we owe on the card is the $1721.50, but also we need to pay interest on that. Okay, so the principal for this will be $1721.50. Then, now we need a daily interest rate. They give you the daily interest rate here. So we're just going to put that in, 0.0521% to the power of 25. Okay, put that into your calculator. Let's see what that gives us. So on your calculator, you're going to type in 1721.5 brackets, 1 plus 0.0521%. Now we're not dividing by 365 here because this is the daily interest rate we're given, into the power of 25. Okay, so put that in and we get 1744.06. Okay, so that's actually the amount owing, A for amount, the amount owing on the card, right? So if I went up to my card here, then I'd be putting in that little blank spot, closing balance would be 1744.06. Okay, now because it says the minimum payment is 5% of the closing balance, I'm then going to find 5% of my closing balance. A little dollar sign there, and let's put that in. Times 5%, you should get $87.20. Okay, so if you go back to the question, it says minimum payment is $25 or 5% of the closing balance, whichever is larger. So we're going to say the closing balance is $87.20 because that's larger than the $25. Okay, let's look at another question. Okay, now NISA has a credit card on which interest at 17% per annum, compounded daily, is charged on the amount owing. At the beginning of the month, NISA owes $500 on her credit card. She makes no other purchases using the credit card, but 15 days later, she repays $250. Assuming that interest is charged for the 15 days, right, they've already done the calculation for us. Calculate the amount owing on the credit card immediately after the $250 payment is made. Okay, so now if you remember, we're looking at the amount owing or the closing balance. Okay, so the closing balance will be, well, obviously we need the previous balance. Okay, and previous balance, we're going to have any purchases, which none were made. So it turns out this is going to be adding the interest. Okay, and then we're going to minus any repayments. Now, okay, so we're going to use the compound interest formula because it compounds daily. I'll write that down. Now, the previous balance was $500. Okay, so that means previous balance was 500. We put that into the compound interest formula, and we need a daily interest rate because they don't give it to us. We've got to divide by 365 in this case. And then we need to work out the number of days. Well, they tell us it's 15. Now, the important thing to remember about the compound interest formula is when you put it in, the interest is actually included in the calculation. Okay, so in this case, the interest plus the previous balance is going to be included in this calculation here. So let's work that out. So on your calculator, let me just fix the mode up for a minute. Mode 1, let's try that. Okay, so we're going to go 500 brackets 1 plus 17% on 365, close bracket, to the power of 15 equals That's $503.50. Okay, so that's the, if you like, the interest which is accrued on the previous balance. So that's the yellow highlighted part. Now, the closing balance, okay, or the amount owing, or the closing balance, remember they're the same thing, okay, so closing balance and amount owing are the same thing. That will be, okay, the previous balance plus the interest, which is the $503.50, and then minus your repayment of $250. Okay, that'll give you $253.50. Okay, last question. All right, also from the HSC 2006, in June, Miss Big Spender received a statement for her credit card account. The account has no interest-free period, compound interest is calculated daily, and charged to the account on the statement date. Here it is, here's the statement. For how many days is she charged interest? Okay, now we've got to read the whole statement here. And the question says that interest is calculated daily and charged to her account on the statement date. So the statement date is here. Here's the statement date, 20th of June 2006. She also made the purchases on 23rd of May. Now, it says interest is charged on amounts from and including the date of purchase up to and including the statement date. Now, because the statement date is included, we are going to put a +1 in our calculations from the number of days. Now, she purchased it on 23rd of May. The statement date is 20th of June. So we need to calculate how many days from 23rd of May to 20th of June. Okay, so May 23 to June 20. Okay, so May 23 to June 20. Now, we know in May there is 31 days, so 31 minus 23 will calculate how many days in May are left. Right, then we're going to add the 20 days of June, okay, and then we're going to +1 because we're including the statement date in the calculation. So anytime you see that in the wording, you're going to +1. Okay, so that is going to be 29 days there. Okay, now calculate interest charged to her account. Okay, so we're going to use the compound interest formula because it says compounding daily. Okay, now the principal will be from the statement. Now let's have a look at the statement. The previous balance was $263.83 and then a payment was made. So that means this payment has paid off that debt. All right, so there's no debt on the card when the purchase is made. Okay, so that means the only purchase we have to consider on this card is $617.72. Now it gives us a daily rate. We could use the annual rate and divide by 365, but if they give you the daily rate, use that instead. Okay, so $617.72 is the only purchase we have to be considering. So $617.72, 1 plus, and then you've got 0.0498%. 0.498%. Now, we've already calculated the days, that's 29. Now, put it into your calculator. Let's have a little calculation here. So 617.72 brackets 1 plus 0.0498% to the power of 29. Okay, this is going to give you 626.70. Now remember that the compound interest formula actually includes the interest in that calculation. So interest, remember, is A minus P. So you're just going to go 626.70 minus 617.72, and that should give you $8.98 as your interest. Okay, so that's the answer. Now just a little aside here. You can see on the statement you've got 18.2% as your annual interest rate. If you did your calculation again, right, so if you did this 617.72, 1 plus 18.2% on 365 to the 29, okay, you'll get a slightly different answer because this interest rate here is actually the rounded version of this, right? Now, you'll still be marked correct either way because mathematically it's the correct process, right? That would give you a slightly different answer, okay, off by a couple of cents, but that's still okay. 0.72. All right, and then obviously the interest will be A minus P, which would be slightly different. It works out to be about $9 to 2 decimal places. Okay. By looking at the question, if they give you the daily interest rate, that's what you should use. But if you use the annual one, divide by 365, that's still okay. Okay, so we'll finish that up there.